If there is one thing we can get from this episode of Overlord, it's the fact that Papa Bone Daddy does not forgive dirty, filthy liars that try to steal from him, and especially tries to throw mud on his comrades. Now, I think this is the first time we have truly seen in Overlord, at the very least in the anime, that Ainz is a straight-up villain. Now, we've seen him do some devious and heinous things in the past, throughout Season 3, Season 2, and even Season 1. He's done some messed up things. But this is the first true time we've seen in Overlord, at the very least the anime, to where Ainz is depicted to be this heinous monster. This monster that obviously does not have any compassion for any individual. Now, I've already stated my viewpoint on why Ainz is acting like he is. I've talked about this a lot in my previous reviews. I mean, when you look at, what's going on here, the bigger picture, these individuals have come into his home to steal from him, and he has set up multiple ways for them to get out of this, but obviously they didn't. So they kind of asked for it. They had what was coming to them. But at the same time, though, Ainz doesn't know the full backstory, the background of all these characters to really understand why they want money so badly. In this case, we have Archie's group that ends up in the crosshairs of Ainz and his entire group because they needed money, or Archie at the very least needed money for her family. And when you look at the entire picture of the way this episode went down, you're constantly rooting for Ainz to have a change of heart. You're always looking at it like, Ainz, show some compassion here. You were once in a group. You once had comrades. You once had people that you fought with to fight against impossible odds. I mean, you know how it must feel to be like this. And that's probably what many, while watching this episode, were thinking when they saw these individuals just standing before Ainz. They even probably thought after they were paralyzed and potentially could already be dead that, he would be fine, he would let them go. But as the episode continued to progress and progress and progress, you're like, oh crap, they're not getting out of this, are they? They're legit going to die. And this is when we truly see Ainz in a different perspective from what we normally have seen. Because usually when it comes to Overlord, we've always seen the POV from the characters that are underneath Ainz, the NPCs. And if we do focus on other characters that are not affiliated with Nazarick, usually they turn out to kind of join Ainz's side, or they're usually under his protection. That's what we've seen already since the beginning of Season 2 up to Season 3. And this is the first time we truly have seen the perspective, the POV of an individual or a group that was completely against Ainz and how they would feel fighting up against such an opponent. And that's what happened. The end result was just a straight up, massacre. That's what happened to them. And it's a very sad episode because I remember when I read this in a light novel, I remember having so many conflicted feelings because I understood where Ainz was coming from. And I understand why he was even angry in this episode when they were trying to lie to him and all that. I understand, why he's angry, but he also said he understands why they tried to lie to him because they were just trying to survive. They're fighting for their survival, which does make sense. He understands that. But I mean, when you look at Ainz's perspective, it is justified. But at the same time, we also know how the other group is, and you're like, they don't really deserve this cruel fate that is coming before them. And when you think about what Ainz said at the end, he's like, death, you're saying that's not mercy. In fact, that is definitely the best form of mercy I can give, because when it comes to Nazarick, death is better than suffering, because that is very true. Think about what we've seen already in this episode and the previous episodes. Think about, Neuronist, what the dude is suffering with the induced kidney stones, to having individuals being literally breeding grounds and endless supplies of meat for the Cockroach King. So, I mean, when you think about, death or suffering, I think death is actually mercy. And so, technically, what Ainz did to Archie was mercy in the grand scheme of things. Yes, it would have been better for her to live and be happy, live outside, but if she had only two options to choose from, either stay in Nazarick and just be an endless supply of meat or something, or, die, death is, I guess easy. So, Archie did, in a way, get mercy. But even then, though, it's still sad because of what happened to her, because if you are a light novel reader, then you know what happens to her sisters, which I want to clarify. I knew for a fact that this anime episode would not clarify what happened to Archie's sisters, because it's It's dark, and it's not something I think the series wants to elaborate on. And if you're a light novel reader, you already know what it is. But to clarify, the outcome of what happens to Archie's sisters at the end, when they're asking where their sister's at, like, when will she return home? Obviously, she's never going to return home. I mean, I'll get more into that in a second. But the sisters are waiting for her, and if you remember from when we got her family introduced, you know, her parents were constant spenders. They wanted to live the noble life. They felt like they needed to have this persona, this presence of being rich, even though they weren't. They were constantly spending money that they did not have, and Archie was constantly working trying to supply this, but obviously she couldn't any longer, and so she was going to take her two sisters and then leave. That's what she was going to do after this job was done, which, like I said, makes us feel very bad for what happened to the, you know, Archie's group in this episode. But once, you know, she's now gone and never coming back, the two sisters, obviously, they're never going to be able to live with her and have a better life. And eventually what it comes down to is the parents actually sell their children into slavery. Yeah, they eventually become slaves. And so that is the cruel fate of Archie's sisters. They end up in slavery, and they eventually overwork, and yeah, that is the fate of the sisters. Obviously, the anime did not want to cover that. It's incredibly dark. It's even darker now that you know what happens to the sisters. But yeah, that is the fate, which really just makes you contemplate how messed up it was for Ainz to do what he did, especially for these two innocent little girls that did not deserve it. But on top of that, it really starts making you think about all the lives that Ainz has affected already in this verse. Because think about it, okay? We know there's a lot of people already that Ainz has probably done the exact same thing to. For instance, in this episode, what he did to the group and all the workers, he's probably already done this to countless individuals already, and we already know of some that's in Demi's dungeon. And when you think about all of this, I mean, you gotta imagine how many lives that Ainz has affected. Not just the people that he's captured and, you know, are now endlessly suffering or breeding grounds or whatever, but the individuals, the family members that are left suffering and never know what happened to their family in the first place, that potentially could have ended up just like Archie's sister. So yeah, that is the dark outlook on this conclusion to this arc, because you're like, oh crap, what Ainz truly has done is messed up. And this is truly when you can no longer deny that Ainz isn't a good guy by any means. He truly is an evil person, and he is not a good man whatsoever. But okay, so let's talk about Archie's fate for a second. Now, as I already said, she's dead. She died, which in a lot of ways was mercy. Now, speaking about what exactly happened to her, once she died, her entire body was used as resources for Nazarick, which was explained by Ainz at the end. The final convo he had with, you know, Intama and Albedo was actually him talking about Archie's body and what happened to it. For instance, Intama actually got Archie's voice. The voice you heard coming from her was Archie's. So think about that for a second. Process how messed up that is. Every time you're going to hear Intama for the remainder of this series, that's going to be Archie's voice actor. That's how messed up that is. Thankfully, the little sisters are never going to have to see that because, you know, they're going to kick the bucket and die. But, I mean, the point is that Intama will now be carrying on Archie's voice because she now has the voice box. And then the whole body was just grounded up and used for everyone else throughout Nazarick to eat on. So, it's incredibly messed up when you think about how Archie's entire body was handled. And now, speaking of the other individuals a part of Archie's group, the two that were still alive and they were asking what would happen to them, not the one that was like the priest was going to get experimented on, but the other two, they are going to be breeding grounds, nests. Whew, that's a horrific image. So yeah, that's the fate of Foresight. What happened to that group? Incredibly messed up. Now, I do want to talk about the details within the episode, like Ainz, why he was wearing what he was wearing, and stuff that kind of wasn't clarified. So many pointed out in my last episode review of Overlord, saying, okay, Chibi, we understand that the little collar going on like the shackle is an EXP item for everybody, and that's why the Lizardman and everybody else was wearing it. But then many decided to point out in the comments section, like, okay, then if that's true, why is Ainz wearing that? I mean, isn't he max level? Yes, I'm glad many of you noticed that. Ainz is max level. But here's the thing. You gotta remember that this is no longer the game. This is a whole new world. And because of that, Ainz has no idea if what his old original level was is actually max, the cap. For instance, you know how a game has a level cap, like let's say level 100, level 120, whatever the level may be. Well, typically when an expansion or something comes out, usually the level cap raises a bit, maybe by 5 levels, 10 levels, 100 levels, you know, it really just depends, or maybe it becomes endless. And in this case, Ainz is experimenting if he can gain EXP, if he can actually surpass level 100 and go up to, let's say, level 101. But it's not just that as well. The reason why he was donning warrior equipment was because he wanted to see if he can gain EXP in that class, gain moves. Kind of like how, you know, Hamsuke, how, you know, she was actually trying to gain warrior-like moves. That's kind of what Ainz is trying to do. He's trying to level up his skill as a warrior before he could fight better. Because currently, his level right now in terms of just warrior stats is around like level 30-something. So, he's a pretty strong individual for the standards of this world, but it's still not that amazing. So, he's trying to see if he can level up his warrior stats, but also get above the max level that was a part of the game. So, that's the reason why Ainz was wearing that collar in this episode. There you go. That is the reason. That's your explanation that many were asking for in the last episode of review. Now, I also do want to mention that in this episode, we also have a quick little scene where Ainz goes into rage mode. That scene, honestly, I don't know which I like better. I don't know if I like the light novel better or if I like the anime better. They were both very good for their own different reasons. I really love hearing Ainz's voice actor going into rage mode, the music behind it. It was a really great scene. Honestly, I got chills just watching it, even though I was a light novel reader and knew what to expect. But at the same time, I do like the raw emotions in the light novel because you're left to your imagination on what actually he was looking like or how he looked like, and just the raw description of how Ainz was just so furious because of what they tried to do to him, lie to his face. So, I mean, I like both versions equally in my opinion, but at the same time, I have to say I kind of prefer the anime version. Not gonna lie. So, yeah, that's pretty much the outcome of what happened in this arc. Now, to discuss the finale, like the scene after the credits, it seems like the kingdom that sent the workers to invade Nazarick are now going to be under attack. If they do not, you know, somehow send an important person to quell Ainz's anger, the entire country is going to be destroyed. So, yeah, we're getting already set up for the next arc, and kind of the entire point of the workers was to test Nazarick's defenses, see if Albedo could actually, you know, put up proper defenses to protect Nazarick that was cheap as possible, but on top of that was to get where the kingdom that attacked him was, you know, in jeopardy of getting annihilated because they tried to raid Nazarick. So yeah, there was a lot of setup, and this was just kind of like the prologue to the events to come. Yeah, think about that. This entire little section with the workers was just a prologue for the upcoming events, the final arc of Overlord Season 3. But that's about it. That's my thoughts on the episode. Let me know your thoughts. How do you feel about this week's episode? How do you feel about Ainz and how evil he kind of was? Be honest in the comments below. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about Archie's fate? How do you feel about, you know, everybody else, you know, that kind of succumbed to Ainz's, you know, rage and fury? Oh yeah, one last little thing to mention though, because many are probably going to mention in the comments if I don't. The web novel of Overlord, the outcome of Archie was a lot different. It was actually, in a lot of ways, even though it's dark, it was, you know, I guess not as dark as what happened to her in this episode. In the web novel, not light novel, web novel, Archie actually lives. She actually becomes just a slave to Shaltir, and she doesn't die. So, it really depends on what your perspective of is, which is worse or not, but yeah, if you're wanting to seek, like, happiness, I guess you can imagine that this was the ending of the web novel, and maybe Archie never really actually had to die. Who knows? But that is how the web novel ending is as well. But I'm going to end this video here. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.